So I was in London, and do you know who Gorinda Chadha? Gorinda Chadha? She's an English, British director. She made Bend It Like Beckham.
Oh yeah. No, yeah.
Well, she's an old friend, and she invited me to lunch, and she said, come to my office. I said, where's your office? She said, Ealing Studios. Really? Because it was the only studio in England I'd never been to, and it's the only studio that's actually in London. You can take the tube to Ealing Studios. Every other studio is outside London. And Ealing, do you know Ealing? I mean, they made great films in the 40s and 50s. And they made probably the best portmanteau horror film ever made, which was called Dead of Night. It's great. And especially in the early 50s, they made many black comedies with Alec Guinness. The Lady Killers, Kind Hearts and Cora. So I wanted to see Ealing. They went out of business in the late 50s, like 1960. But the studio, it's 3 or 4 stages. It's very small. The BBC used it. It's where all the Monty Python television shows were shot, and it's been used since. And this guy named Barnaby Thompson, with some other people, bought it like 10 years ago as a real estate deal, and now they're starting to make movies. So what happened was I was visiting Gorinda because I wanted to see Ealing, and she introduced me. This is 2 years ago. She introduced me to this guy, and he said, "Are you the filmmaker?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I have a script I'd like you to read." So I said, okay. And it was this, written by Piers Ashworth and Nick Moorcroft. And what attracted me about it, really, is the real Burke and Hare, despicable, horrible, I mean, really villainous, merci. And, I mean, terrible people. And it's completely inappropriate material for a romantic comedy. And the challenge, which I like, is to take these villains and make them sympathetic. It's genuinely perverted, so that's what appeals me about it.
And they were immediately attracted to an American doing this story?
Yeah, I don't think the nationality of a filmmaker has anything to do with anything.
But it's a very British comedy, isn't it?
It's British. I don't know. Is Animal House a British comedy? No. Why not?
Because it's more lively, to say.
I don't know. I don't hold by that. I think that's silly. I really do. I mean, you know, some of the great American comedies were directed by Ernst Lubitsch or Billy Wilder, or, you know. I just don't. It's, you know, who's American director? People like, what's his name? You know. No, he's Chinese. But
Made in China,
but you know who, you know, when people talk about Hollywood and stuff, and you look at those movies, who's a Hollywood director? John Woo. You know, who's a Hollywood director? Louis Malle. You know, I mean, John Schlesinger. I'm serious. You know, Edgar Wright. I think that's dumb. It depends on the property. And I've always taken pride in the fact that I hope I don't have a style. I mean, I don't want people to say, oh, that's because if you look at Thriller or you look at the Blues Brothers, I don't want you to go, oh, those are made by the same guy.
Oh, that's true.
Or Trading Places or Three Amigos or whatever movies I made, Into the Night or American Werewolf. I hope you don't go, you know.
That's definitely something to say about your career and your films. They're all very, very, very different. So.
Well, that's a compliment.
Yeah, because you've actually more or less attempted every genre at this.
I've tried. You know, directors get typed just like actors. So because I've had great success in comedy and horror and musical, that's all they'll give me money for. If I try to make, you know, I'd like to make a Western. You know, I love Westerns, or I love, you know, whatever genre, I don't care. And it's interesting to me, this thing that, and the executives do it, producers do it too. They say a director, he makes big movies, or she makes small movies, or it's complete horseshit. Because a director's job is exactly the same. If it's a $200 million movie or it's a $1 million movie, the job is exactly the same. And if it's a comedy or a horror picture or whatever, the job is exact. You tell a story through the juxtaposition of image. It's the same. So I've never understood that kind of typing.
As a director, you put creativity into the process, no? You try to get the best out of the actors and...
No, but that's my point. It doesn't matter the genre. The director's job is the same. And people do not understand that. And also people have trouble when you don't, they want to categorize. Do you know, how do you say categorize in French? Okay.
Méthode dans des
It's like
catégories.
label. It's like this goes in this department. So, you know, I wrote like American Werewolf in London. I wrote that in 1969. But I made it in 1981 because everyone who read it said, what the fuck is this? Is this funny or is this scary? It's both.
I think that's your biggest talent, that you're one of the few directors I know who actually combines comedy with another genre, because it's a horror/comedy, and it's always
I don't think it's a
neither.
comedy.
But
I don't intend it to be a comedy.
But
I
it
want
isn't.
it to be very funny.
But it is very, very scary.
It's a horror. It's not a happy story. Those boys, you know, I've always been fascinated by the American Werewolf. Where do you see those boys? They show up you see them in a truckload of sheep. And where do they go? The slaughtered lamb. You know, it's not subtle. They're dead from the first frame. And I've never really understood why people call that a comedy. I mean, I know why, because it's very funny. But it's not a happy story. I was very happy. He's passed away since we made the movie. But for me, at the end, you see Ray Harryhausen with Bob Painter. And Robert Painter was a cinematographer who, for me, he shot An American Werewolf in London, Spies Like Us, Into the Night, Thriller, and Trading Places. And then he got too old. He started with me in his 70s, and he got too old, and I said, Bob, we're going to have to put you down. No, but he retired. And so I called him and said, be in the movie. So he came. He's very old, and he came to the movie. So I like it that he's in the film. And Ray Harryhausen has been in like 4 of my movies.
How did you get all those directors?
Do you know,
at one
every
place?
movie I've ever made has that many directors, but for some reason, Into the Night is the one they ask about. But did you see in this movie Michael Winner?
I didn't see Mike. Where was he?
He's the guy in the coach who says, "Can't this bloody thing go faster?" Who goes off the cliff. Or Costa Gavras?
That one
Or
I saw in
Roman Gavras is now a director too.
But how did you get them all in there? How
I
did you do it?
I said, "Come and be in the movie."
And they were immediately, of course, there was
Sure.
Michelle Pfeiffer, of course, they wanted to do it.
I've had everybody from Gillo Portocarvo to Robert Wise and Don Siegel and Lucas and Spielberg. Everybody. I've had everybody in my movies. The only person who ever said no was Robert Aldrich. I'm sorry, not Robert Aldrich. It's wrong. Robert Altman. When I asked Robert Altman, he not only said no, he got very angry. And he said, "You think I'm a fucking actor?" I said, "No." He said, "I'm not." He got really angry. He was like, "Okay, sorry." He was the only one who said no.
I found it very interesting that you mentioned Let the Right One In tonight.
I'm sorry, I mentioned what?
Let the Right One In.
The Swedish movie.
Yeah, the Swedish
I love
Mouse.
that movie.
And I was curious what director you feel are the most interesting in the what we would call the latest generation of director.
There's so many. There are many, many very good directors working. I couldn't.
We got time.
But I couldn't. I mean, the trouble with questions like that is I give you an answer and then later I'll think, "Oh, fuck! I didn't think." You know, there's so many good directors working now.
It's another list.
Yeah, it's another one of those lists I hate. But I thought that movie was really good. Although, did you ever see a movie I made called Innocent Blood? Because they stole a whole gag from it in the hospital. Remember, they opened the window, the guy burst. I went, "Hey!" But I think that's a great movie. I think Edgar Wright is a terrific director. There's so many. I don't know. There's so many good directors.
The first movie I remember seeing of you, a Kentucky Fried Movie, which was really an homage to a lot of directors. And that was something that wasn't really done that much at that point in cinema. That was pretty new, that movie. How did you sell that to the studios? Were they immediately gave
We
it to
didn't.
You didn't?
That was made independently. We just raised the money and made it. That's with Jerry Zucker, David Zucker, and Jim Abrams. We raised the money independently and made it for $500,000.
Do you think in the current climate of movie making, a movie like that would still be possible to make at this point? Where actors would do
Not by
such kind of role?
not by a studio, but independently, yes. It's a different time. All the studios are now owned by huge multinational corporations, and they're French and German and Japanese, and you know they're corporate, so they're much more conservative. If you look at comedies now, they're very conservative, and if you look at a movie like almost all of them, they're very conservative. If you look at Animal House, it ends in complete chaos and anarchy. A studio wouldn't do that now. You know, it's different time. Were you asking a question or waving at something?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So, Mr. Landis, thanks for coming. Thanks for making great films for us. It really was an interesting film. I've never seen a film in which so many people in so many lines said each other's names so much. Really.
You haven't seen many films.
It's true. But the most painful scene to watch, and I'm wondering, it was the play within the play, the Macbeth tragedy, where he's finally lighting the candles. He's going to meet her, and then the Edinburgh militia marches in. This was a really painful scene to watch. It was really the most horrific and painful scene in the entire film, because everything else was building up to that. I mean, these guys built it on sand, and they were gaining their fame through killing other people. And this was a really interesting film, and it made me think in another way, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
What is your advice on risk-taking and being controversial?
As opposed to...
As opposed to basically being passive, I'd say, but
In
taking
how?
new risks.
You mean taking risk how? You mean in filmmaking or in...
Well, in one's career, I mean, it would have... Well, it could be general, but I mean, as a director, basically you initialize an idea and you take it to the... And you basically finish it off, right?
Well, it's an interesting thing. The problem... all directors are schizophrenic because you have... The people who give you money to make a movie do not give you money because they're nice.
Yeah,
They
okay.
give you money because they hope to make money. And
Absolutely.
you make a movie and you hope people will see it. You don't make a movie so people don't see it.
So there is a compromise to make.
So there's it's constant compromise. I've been lucky in that I've made about 8 films where it was the way I intended it, and fuck them, that's how I made it. And I was very lucky that they were very successful. I've also done that, and then the picture tanks. So
Okay.
what's interesting is that the movie, in the real world, in the real world, not the way it should be, but in the real world, for motion pictures, all that matters is how much money it makes.
Okay.
But that's bullshit, as you know, because many really good movies fail, and many really crap movies are big hits. But often good movies are big hits too, so there's no rule. And the risk, it's. I mean, I would take the risk, but it depends on who's hiring you and what movie you're making.
Can you give us an example on a movie where you made a compromise, where you now feel a little bit maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe that was a good decision?
Every movie I think I should know. People say, "Do you watch your movies?" The answer is hell no. All I see are the mistakes. Filmmaking is a very strange thing because it's completely collaborative. And what people don't understand about a movie is the odds are against you. Because you know what Hitchcock, he used to call the crew? He called them the people between me and my movie. But if your actor shows up and he's drunk or on drugs, or he had a terrible fight with his wife, or your actress shows up and she's having her period, you don't know. I mean, there's so many things. When you make a film, there's the weather, the electronics, the mechanics. There's so many things that are involved in making a movie that you very rare. I can only think of 2 filmmakers really, Stanley Kubrick and David Lean, who were able to say, "I don't care. I'm waiting for that right sunset." But nobody else. Everyone compromises. Again, directing a big movie or a small movie is exactly the same. The difference is you 2 guys do this, or you 17,000 guys do this. In the Blues Brothers, the big logistical thing was the car stuff. Because we had 34 cars going over 100 miles an hour in downtown Chicago, and it was like a logistical war. Because you had to make sure for a mile and a half that no one could come on the street. We were crazy. I mean, because we were doing, it was all real. You know, like that when Henry Gibson drives off. We really dropped a car from Sikorsky Helica, 1,400 feet.
There was no CGI back then, so.
Well, there were still special effects, but we, you know, it was crazy. And Dan Aykroyd is a great driver, so he did a lot of that driving.
You made a step to TV like a lot of other directors. You did the Masters of Horror series. Do you think you're going to continue?
I made TV way before that. I
Yeah, but
I
that's
have
the
as
last
a
one,
company, my company, St. Clair, we made. Do you know who St. Clair is? I love the Catholic Church. I think it's very funny. And St. Clair's the patron saint of television. I think that's really funny. Anyway, but did you ever see a show? Well, you didn't, but I made, my company made Weird Science. We made Sliders. We made Dream On. We made, thank you. We made a lot of shows. And what? Well, anyway, so I've done television, and but the Masters of Horror was great because that was Mick Garris. We had a lot of people, and the way that it worked was we each had $1 million and 10 days in Vancouver to shoot, and we could do anything we wanted, as long as it was horrific, you know, anything. So that was fun. I enjoyed that.
You think you're gonna do some more episodes of that in the future?
Well, that was such a good experience because you know, it's very rare now that you have complete control of, you can do whatever the fuck you want, you know. I don't know. I doubt that'll ever happen again.
And then the other big question for directors now, what about 3D? What are your thoughts on 3D?
Do you know, 3D's just a gimmick. I love 3D, but do you know, what's the best 3D movie ever made? The best looking 3D. Avatar? It's Creature from the Black Lagoon. For 3D to work, it has to be, you know, a split beam in sync. So when they did 3D movies in the 50s, in Los Angeles, in New York, in Chicago, Boston, in the big cities, when it would be first run, the 3D would be perfect. But then when it started to go out, if it got a scratch or the film broke or the projectionist is, you know, whatever he's doing, if you're one frame out of sync, you get a headache and it looks bad. And that's what killed 3D the first time, because people would see it in their local theater and go, ugh, you know. But now 3D is exactly the same. It's just that it's digital. So you don't need two projectors. And it's always in sync because it's a computer. It's digital. But 3D is the same fucking thing. It's no big new thing. And I haven't seen, you know, I think the best 3D movie is still, if you see Creature from the Black Lagoon projected correctly, but most people don't. But it's the best 3D. It's better than Avatar. But did you see, I don't know what it was called here, but Despicable Me?
Yeah, we've seen that.
I thought that was very good use of 3D.
But for animation, it works pretty good. But
Great. The best movies I've seen all year have been animated movies. You have to remember, when television started, who were the big directors? Cecil B. DeMille had a TV show. Alfred Hitchcock, You Can't Get Bigger, had a TV show. This whole idea that it was like bad to do television, I don't know where you got.
No, I mean, like,
but that's always been that way.
Quality of television is like becoming higher than.
It was actually, yeah, than the movies. Oh, I agree. People are more, because you have more freedom. There's a lot of I think the best comedy now is shows like South Park, American Dad. I mean, there are a lot of, in America now, there's like 15 really good comedy shows. Smart and funny. And, gosh, you know, and The Simpsons is still great. You know, I mean, it's...
Then I have one final question for you. That's my question I ask every director or actor that comes here. It's a dream project. It's unlimited funds, unlimited cast. You could do whatever you want.
Do you know, Mark Twain is my hero. And he said something that's true. He said a classic piece of literature, a classic book, is a book everyone knows and nobody's read. And he wrote a book called The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which is a fascinating book that everybody knows the premise and the story, but who here has read it? Nobody. So, yay, that guy.
There's always one guy.
Yeah. Anyway, the book, it was Franklin Roosevelt's favorite book. And you know, in the Depression, I don't know, but have you ever heard of the New Deal and the work projects? Those all come from Connecticut Yankee. He wrote it at a time. It's not the book everyone remembers because everyone knows, oh yeah, he gets hit on the head and he wakes up at King Arthur's court and it's all very sweet. And all the movies made. The only ones who actually made not a bad movie was the Soviets. But it was interesting because Hank Morgan, he becomes completely corrupted by power. He brings modern technology to medieval England and the WPA. I mean, it's very complicated, very funny, but there are pages where he's just so fucking angry about the church and about the concept of aristocracy. The book's a very angry book. The contemporary critic, Charles Dudley Warner, said about the book, he said, it was written with a pen warmed up in hell because there's the pages go by where it's just so angry. But then there's stuff that's really funny. And it ends up, do you know what happens? The Pope declares a jihad against Great Britain, and the knighthood of Europe comes to attack England, which is ringed with barbed wire. It ends with the French, German, Italian, Swiss knights in their armor frying against an electric fence being Gatling gun. It's not what you remember. It's a shocking. It's also very funny because he becomes completely corrupt with power. And the problem is, to get a movie star, they would not be faithful to the book because it's ugly. He becomes a very bad guy, and they wouldn't do it. So that's. But if I could, I doubt I'll ever get the chance because it's big budget, unless Brad Pitt said he wanted to do it or something. But I would love to make that movie.
You never know, of course. Well, Mr. Landis, we would really thank you a lot for bringing us all these wonderful movies, these wonderful memories. We're rewatching those movies all the time. You're a knight now. You're always welcome in Brussels.
Knight now. What does that mean? I mean, do I get like a discount or something?
Yes,
if I go buy a waffle and say I'm a knight, they go, oh well, here.
Yeah, you can always try. It's a strange little country we have here. So, Mr. Landis, let's give him a big round of applause.
Merci beaucoup.
Landis.
Thank you. Thank you very much.